the one thing that I know is as we did the same transition as we started ramping up, we started figuring out the private money, and we started figuring out the relationship piece. And what ended up happening for us, and I don't know whether it was good or bad looking back, is you end up having more money than you can actually place into houses. So then what you start doing is you start really getting aggressive with acquisitions and finding deals. And I don't know. Your judgment just seems to get blurred. You think you're following all the rules and all the things you're doing, but for some reason, you got this lender, they want to, do a deal with you. They've got the money and you're worried about that money drying up. So you go out and you find a deal and you go through and you do your numbers just like you always have. But for some reason, when you're in the deal, you made some mistakes. So is that what happened to you? I know you guys were doing, gosh, 5, 6 at a time, maybe even 10 at a time. We were up to doing over 20 a month is what we were doing at the peak. And that's when things really started to, kind of get difficult. And I'm not going to say fall apart, but started really kind of seeing the cracks in the foundation, not literally, but that's where our business stressed. Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, sort of. I would say yes and no. A couple things. One, right? Like, so you start having all this money, and you can get loose with your risk tolerance. I guess I'd say it was probably the best way to put it, right? Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, like, yeah, like you kind of get cocky, like, oh yeah, I've got the guys, I got the team, I got the people, we can make this happen, we can go do this, we can make that happen, or this or whatever, right? And so I think that's part of it. I think that's number one. Number two, for us, this is what we started finding, and this is kind of where our wheels fell off a little bit, is when we started, almost all of our deals were easy: paint, carpet, flooring, make some landscape, basic stuff, right? And we could be in and out of a house usually in 6 months or less, which for some of you might go, wow, that seems like a long time. But, Buffalo, like, we're talking usually 45 to 60 days to close a house. So from opening till closing, you got to factor in an extra couple months there. But as we went on and more folks started getting into the market of flipping and all that, we started losing more of those deals to other people. And then I think a lot of contractors started getting into the game and just doing it themselves. And I can't really compete against a guy who's willing to spend 90 cents on the dollar because 10 cents is okay because he's doing his labor for free. And so we got bigger and bigger rehabs. And then as you get these bigger and bigger ones, you start opening walls, you find things, or you get into problems that you wouldn't have gotten into that might have existed in a house, but you didn't see them. So you didn't need to fix them necessarily. They weren't apparent until you opened a wall. And so I think that started happening. And then we had a ton of issues with contractors. It was impossible to find someone who was consistently good over time. Even if we offered to pay them more, it just seemed like you couldn't find someone to keep up, or they would be able to take on a certain capacity of houses, but there was never, we couldn't get past that. And then you try to bring in someone else and then they would get butthurt because you're like, well, I wanted that house. Okay, well, you can't barely keep up with what you got. How are you going to do another one, right? So those kinds of issues. And, we had a lot there. And then, as we went on, the biggest thing, and this is kind of a big reason why I came back to Buffalo for a bit, was, we started making, every house started taking longer and longer to fix. We were making less and less money per house. And at a certain point, we had to go, this doesn't make sense anymore. Yes, we're profitable, but at what expense and what risk ratio and risk tolerance? I think at one point, we're talking, we had probably $7 or $8 million placed into properties. And that, when you're looking at it going, man, my margins are dropping down to, sub 10% on a deal, you start sweating, if one thing goes wrong, one thing I didn't account for, one whatever, and all of a sudden that deal goes, flatline or negative. And then, it's like, man, and then it may not seem bad with one deal, but then you multiply that times, $6+ million, and you start thinking, well, if all these go bad, and the stories get into your head a little bit, but I think for us, that was sort of the final straw of, hey, even if we are profitable at this, the profit that we're making is just not worth it. We're not trying to be the Walmart of house flippers. That's just not my jam. I'd rather do less houses of higher quality and make bigger profit than the other way around. And it's easier for a million other reasons too to do that. But, it brings its own risks for sure.
Yeah. The contractors are especially, I can't even imagine. I mean, we do a couple houses still. I try to do none. My wife wants to dabble in design, finding contractors today is even harder than it was back when, in this era, when we're talking, we'll say, my first flip was 06, yours was in that 2008 range. And we went hard straight up to probably 2018, 2019. And I know our trajectory was very similar to yours, but we both had major issues, not just with contractors, but also with building inspectors. And there's this one building inspector, I'll leave his name out of this, that he just had it out for flippers. And it just so happened to be that this building inspector was in one of the best areas that you could flip houses, like the creme de la creme of areas in a town, like where you'd want to flip houses, where you can profit big because people want houses in that area. That's where this building inspector was. He hated, us. I don't know how to describe it.
I think he hated everybody. I don't think he liked
but I'm just going to make
period.
this personal and just say that Bob, he hated us more than everybody else. And still to today, probably, I hear people say, oh yeah, we mentioned your name. Cause we had the show, we mentioned your name to the building inspector and he said, oh, stay away from them. And it's just, he's just, I don't know. I can't believe he hasn't got run over by a car yet. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But you're going to face these things. And, you're going to have contractors steal money. I have 4 open lawsuits still with contractors, mostly roofers, that it just took our money and just ran. And you would think, oh my God, how can they do that? Well, they do. Well, then how can they win in the lawsuit? They don't. They lose. But then they make sure that there's never a dollar in their bank account. They make sure that their income is never reported. Like, it is the craziest thing to think that people can live like this. It's actually, when you dig into it, folks, it's sad. It's sad because some of these contractors, they have families, they have kids, and these kids have to watch and learn that this is what their father or parent did to screw people. And it's really a sad state of affairs. But
then worse is they get that money mindset of like, this is what, this is acceptable. It's okay. Right. Like, and that's even worse. It just perpetuates the problem further.
I agree. Now I want to transition into something else. So Bob had mentioned there wasn't a lot of flippers in our area. There was me and my wife, there was Bob, I would argue to say during that era, we were probably the 2 biggest flippers in Buffalo, bar none. Like, you put us together and there was nobody that even came close within half. But, it did get busier and busier. And, as that happened, things got weird. But Bob and I saw this unique opportunity. And I'll never forget. And I don't remember. I knew Bob was coaching for Fortune Builders, which was the creme de la creme of coaching. And still today, I would say Reigns is probably one of the most transparent, ethical coaching companies to ever enter and exit the real estate world, because they just did a good job. And Bob was a coach there. I was part of another company that we paid a lot of money to coach. So the thing I want to preface with that, folks, is if you're going to get into real estate, get a good mentor, get a good coach, get somebody that's ridden through the hard economic times. I don't care if it's the Great Recession, okay, or maybe the pandemic, like somebody that's failed that then overcame that. Because today, it just seems like so many people are out there doing things and they just think there's no downside to any of this. And they're just, giving bad advice. Now, I paid.
It's even worse than that. Like, I was on a call the other day and the number of people that were on, they're like, yeah, I started flipping in 2021 and then 2020 and then things slowed down. And so now I'm going to coach people on my process. I was like, wait, hang on a second. You just started recently and all of a sudden you're facing your first slowdown in a market, and now you're going to coach people on a process that's not working, because if it was working, you wouldn't need to be coaching in this way. And I just see so many of these people that they won for a short period of time. And so they think that they're great. And it's like, hey, and I just want to caution everybody, right? Like, find somebody who has, like Chris said, lived through it, who's done it, who has the track record, if they're going to be your coach. And I'm not downplaying that person can't teach you something, but just understand what you're getting yourself into if you're going to.
I couldn't agree more. We're in the longest bull run in history. Real estate is in a massive bubble across the country. Buffalo, even for the first time, I think ever, is in a bubble as well. Yeah, right? It's an interesting dynamic.
It's great. It's fun, right? For us, like, oh wow, this is
crazy. It's crazy. I mean, I don't even know what to make of it. I don't know where the people are coming from, because who the hell wants to live in Buffalo? But anyway, it's just, be very cautious in who you get. Like I said, my first flip was in 06. I almost went bankrupt in 2008 because of a development project that I did. Bob and his dad have gone through these economic cycles. We don't coach anymore, but I'm just trying to preface, like, just find somebody that has gone through it if you really want to make it through what's about to come.